And it is Rethinking Heroes live streaming, not only going out over the radio antennas, but you can go to YouTube, Carrie Harrison, CaryHarrison, or just Google it together and it'll come up. You can go to Twitch, same thing, Carrie Harrison, Twitter, same thing, Carrie Harrison, Facebook, same thing, Carrie Harrison, and you can watch the beautiful color production here and see the attractive faces of our guests. They have to be attractive or we can't invite them on nowadays, it turns out. And of course, it's all subjective, isn't it? Including me. Here's a BBC headline. A U.S. airman has died after setting himself on fire. We all know about this in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. And he was shouting, "Free Palestine." Aaron Bushnell, he was 25 years old. Taken to a hospital after Secret Service officers extinguished the flames. Before setting himself alight in what he called an extreme act of protest, he said he would no longer be complicit in genocide. And the story of Aaron's act is a harrowing reminder of the cost of war. Well, with us right now is Matthew Ho. He's the Associate Director of the Eisenhower Media Network, a former Marine Corps captain, an Afghanistan State Department officer, and a disabled Iraq war veteran. And he said that it's important to note that Aaron Bushnell's self-elimination, elimination for sure, and immolation. If you don't know that word, by the way, it means to light yourself on fire. It's a great word. You may hear it more. I hope not, but you never know. His self-immolation was not just an act of resistance to genocide and a statement of non-complicity, but that it also came from the pain and distress caused by the great and wide wreckage of this war and all wars. Matthew Ho, with his own experiences as a veteran, speaks to the deep and generational scars of military conflicts, underlining the personal and societal toll of America's military engagements. Matthew Ho, I want to welcome you once again to Rethinking Heroes.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me back on.
I am glad to have you here as we unfortunately never get to come and just talk about what's it like having been in the Marines. Was it fun? Was boot camp? Do you remember that? Did you sweat? We never get to have those conversations. Instead, we really have to plumb your expertise of what's going on around us. What does it mean and what's our position in it? And here we have Aaron Bushnell lighting himself on fire, something we might see in the Middle East somewhere more commonly, but Americans are doing it now. This is new.
Well, it's actually not new, Carrie, and thanks again for having me back on. But, as my colleague Ann Wright writes in Common Dreams this week, during the Vietnam War, there were 5 Americans who practiced self-immolation to protest the Vietnam War. And of course, many people are familiar with the Buddhist monks who did so. And there's a long tradition of self-immolation as a form of resistance, protest, and also importantly, sacrifice. In terms of putting your body, putting your soul, putting yourself as a form of demonstration that you are not complicit with what is occurring here. And that's certainly what Aaron Bushnell was expressing in those final moments before his death, very poignantly, very articulately, very calmly in those moments before he self-immolated. He expressed this desire for protest, this desire for resistance, this desire not to be complicit. But, as we'll discuss, that's only one aspect of what was going on here, I believe, with Aaron. The other aspect, of course, was the moral injury he was suffering from.
And let's talk about that for a second, because your experience as a former Marine Corps captain and Afghanistan State Department officer, and who knows what else, are going to shape your perspective on these current events. How do you evaluate this?
Well, in terms of his self-immolation, you see, in this terms of also someone being who's been involved in these protests, being involved in other anti-war activity going back 15 years now, a lot of this can come from a frustration, right? An anger, a feeling of nothing is working. We have to do something extreme to get the attention. We have to do something extreme to have people take notice. We have to do something extreme to get people to change their behavior. And Aaron notes this, of course, right before he self-immolates, where he describes what he's going to be doing as an extreme form of protest. And so certainly I think the understanding for where this came from, as someone has to do something to change things, as we're witnessing this genocide in Gaza occurring, as the horrors mount every day, and as our government is continually complicit, sending roughly 3 cargo planes full of bombs every day to Israel. I think people are similarly frustrated that our actions are not having an effect, not having a practical effect, or the effect that they're having is too slow. But then also, too, I come from a place where I, too, suffered moral injury. I, too, had issues of suicidality because of what I did in war, my complicity, what I took part in, my participation in the war, particularly the war in Iraq. And so I understand where those feelings of guilt, regret, shame, very deep, very penetrating emotions that have undercut your ethical, religious, moral beliefs and identity, how heavy that is, how controlling that is, and it brings about such a degree of distress, of psychological, emotional, spiritual distress, that for many people who are suffering moral injury, suicide seems to be the only relief. And then there's a third aspect too, I think we have to address if we're looking at this from a larger human experience, societal level, is this idea of violence as a cleansing action. And you see in some of the words that Aaron said in his last days and months, he talked about never being able to get the blood off of his hands, or in his will, he writes that the machine demands blood. And so this idea that there has to be some mechanism to atone, to repent, to cleanse. And I think when people hear that about blood being on his hands and never being able to get it off, I think for most of us, we go back to high school, right? And we think about Lady Macbeth and out damn Spot, right? And the guilt that she is carrying from her participation in that murder. And to be clear, right? She didn't conduct the murder. She was just complicit with it. But the guilt, the shame, the regret from having done that is so great that she can't get that blood off her hands. And so that's the type of again, psychological, emotional, spiritual factors we're talking here. We talk about moral injury. So I think when we look at Aaron's death, we have to look at it as a confluence of all those things, and not just say it was just one thing. If we truly want to understand what he did, why he did it, and just as importantly, if we truly want to know how we can best respect his actions, memorialize those actions without celebrating them, but memorialize those actions so that we can utilize his sacrifice to further our resistance to war, occupation, and genocide.
We're talking to Matthew Ho, Associate Director of the Eisenhower Media Network, former Marine Corps captain, an Afghanistan State Department officer, and a disabled Iraq war veteran, pointing out that Aaron Bushnell's recent self-immolation came from the pain and distress caused by the great and wide wreckage of this war and all wars going back. Matthew Ho, with his own experiences as a veteran, is speaking to the deep and generational scars of military conflicts, underlining the personal and societal toll of America's military engagements. And I was just at the gym the other day, Matthew Ho, talking to a guy who is in the reserves. And I asked him, are you going to go sign up now that the world is falling apart again and you're probably going to get called up? He said, I won't do it. I said, well, why is that? And he was a patriotic guy. He said, well, it's simple. I can't march along someone else's troops using our weapons and follow orders from their leaders as an American. And he said, it's just, I can't reconcile that. And not to mention the idea of cleansing Hamas when you can't say what Hamas is, who's with Hamas. Right. What does that even mean? And you've wiped out, what is it, 1 out of 20 women and children, or some outrageous number, right, in the tens of thousands now. Like, they're not seeing anything other than just killing people. At least that was his position as somebody from within the military. I am not in the military. I don't know. That's why I look to people like you, Matthew Ho, to help make sense out of what is clearly confusing to most of us. Let's talk for a little bit about the role of media, which is what you've done using the role of media and highlighting the true costs of conflicts and military actions.
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of our organization, the Eisenhower Media Group, as well as other organizations like Veterans for Peace and About Face, Veterans Against the War. Of course, Vietnam Veterans Against the War is still around. So we have various veterans groups around the country that seek to do exactly that, Carrie, to expose, if you will, the true costs of war, to expose the realities of warfare. Most people are familiar with the adage from Plato that only the dead have seen the end of war. And I think many people are not quite certain what that means. But what that means is that the war lives on. It's a living legacy, and it comes home. And of course, it's easy to understand how it lives on in the conflict zones, in the war zones. It's how that loss is still there, that destruction is still there. People are becoming better acquainted with the toxic legacies of war. So, say you look back and see what has occurred in Southeast Asia, the issues of the poisoning of the land and water by the Agent Orange program that still devastate the people of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, as well as, say, the unexploded ordnance and landmines, all those bombs that didn't go off that are still being pulled out of the ground every day in those countries. Look, there's still bombs being pulled out of the ground in Germany and Japan from World War II. They still find artillery shells in France from World War I. And it's not, a curious or seemingly random event. It occurs regularly. But for those here at home, this idea of the war never ending is that war comes with, as we were discussing, an extreme psychological, emotional, and spiritual cost that doesn't get better with time. It's not the same type of thing as having your heart broken or even the loss of a relative or a close friend, a loved one. This is something where you have transgressed, you have violated your very deep, sincere, ethical, religious, moral boundaries. And that has basically ripped away the foundations of who you are. It is the death of your soul, essentially. And to recover from that, if you don't have professional help and if you don't have people in your life, is extremely difficult. And that's why that distress, that pain that comes from that is so deep, it's so victimizing that many turn to suicide as a way out. And we have the studies from the Veterans Administration that go back 40 years now. Back in the early 1980s, the VA was saying the best predictor of veteran suicide is combat-related guilt. And that's what all the studies since then have shown. So not saying that all veteran suicides are from moral injury, but saying a good bunch are, particularly if they are combat veterans. And I also want to say one more thing about moral injury as well, Carrie, is that this is not a military-only thing. Anyone in any capacity, in any industry, in any profession, in any form of life can suffer moral injury. And again, it's a betrayal, essentially, a betrayal of who you believed you are. And that betrayal comes then in a form of action or inaction on your part, where you transgress, you violate, you betray those ethical, religious, and moral boundaries. And also as well, moral injury can come from an outside force. So the idea of having moral injury because you were sent to a war that was based upon lies and then you took part in all of that violence, that itself is a moral injury as well.
All right. We're going to pause for just a second. We're going to end with talking to Matthew Ho about having witnessed the effects of war firsthand and the message he's going to have for those advocating for peace and justice in just a sec.
Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Just a quick shout out of love for KPFK. Once again, to remind you to pick up the phone and call 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Did I happen to mention 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Pick up that phone, make a donation right now, $50, $75, $100, so that you can support independent, free, and unfettered broadcasting. This is school for others. And that's kind of the note I keep hitting over and over again, but it's true. We get our information. When I say we, I mean we, the live humans, maybe not you, maybe not me. But guess what? If you're under 20, where are you getting your news? 100% of it? Facebook, TikTok. It's egregious, but it's a fact. So we can counter that. We can pepper. We take Rethinking Heroes and put it on Facebook. Gasp. We put it on TikTok. Gasp. Yes, we are co-participating in the way people consume their information since there no longer is a Walter Cronkite. That's why you need to pick up the phone right now and call 818-985-5735. Pick it up. Call 818-985-KPFK. Go to kpfk.org. Make a secure donation right now, 50, 75, $100, and support this radio station. We're not a radio station anymore. We are a media station. We are live streaming as we speak this show. You can go to Facebook. You can go to the KPFK Facebook page. You will see this show live streaming right now. Imagine, with all the bells and whistles. And what did it cost you? Nothing. Who's paying for it? Me. Yeah, that's how much I believe in this. But that's what we're doing for you. We're helping you. We're not asking you, feed us, and we're going to do nothing back. We're co-feeding at the same time. We want to up the game. Not improve stuff so much, but keep it so we have access to all the people of Earth, because we are the mobile virtual school system that exists today. So pick up the phone, call 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, make a $50 donation, a $75 donation, a $100 donation, and go to kpfk.org and do it now.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes. Don't forget to get our free newsletter, Our Favorite Price, free at RethinkingHeroes.com. And you're going to get not only videos of all of this, but stuff we don't dare put on the radio because of FCC, and also upcoming stories that are breaking in between. We're talking to Matthew Ho, former Marine Corps captain, Afghanistan State Department officer, and a disabled war veteran. And we're talking about what it all means, the recent self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell. And Matthew Ho, as someone who has witnessed the effects of war firsthand, what message do you have for those of us advocating for peace and justice?
Oh, I mean, I think the first is do not get frustrated. Do not feel as if we're not having an impact. It may be slow and it may be difficult, and certainly not appearing in the way that we would like to see. But if we look at the public opinion, the American people are on our side. Just another poll the other day, 67% of Americans support a ceasefire. You know, you go and you look at the number of Americans who were opposed for the Iraq War and the Afghan War during those wars. It was always almost a majority. Only in the first couple of years of those wars was it not a majority. And the same, when you look at, say, wars in Syria or in Libya, there has been a success among the peace movement in terms of educating the American public and galvanizing public opinion against war. The problem we're up against, of course, is we have a political system that's insulated by money, right? So you have a political system, Carrie, that is no longer affected by the mass mobilization of people. And that political insulation, or that money insulation of our political system is further is reinforced by the gerrymandering and the ballot access restrictions and all the other ways that our elections are crooked or rigged. So what we have to find is we have to find a way to get around that. We have to find a way to defeat that. We have to find a way to challenge power and threaten their power in the names of peace. Because what happened, as we all know, was that the movements of the 60s and 70s, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, and then in the 80s, the nuclear movement was doing very well. That did challenge power. That did upset things. That did change things. And the system, the establishment, the elites, whatever you want to call it, recognized that. And so it evolved, right, to insulate itself from that kind of threat. And so we have to evolve as well. And we have to recognize, well, how do we take on this power? How do we threaten the power if they are not going to pursue peace? And I think one of the things, just to chime in on what you were just saying about your own program, about what KPFK is doing, is this is a huge part of it. this type of technology and this idea of media being able to inform, being able to mobilize, to organize, to educate, this has such a central role in any of our attempts along any of lines of peace and social justice to threaten power unless they change.
That was fabulous. And I'm going to pull that out as a promo. So good. I want to thank you so much, Matthew Ho, Associate Director of the Eisenhower Media Network, former Marine Corps captain, an Afghanistan State Department officer, and a disabled war vet, talking about not only Aaron Bushnell's recent self-immolation, but the greater idea of war and the results of it. Appreciate you very much. Looking forward to having you back on, my friend. Thanks once again for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you. Kerry Harrison with you. Just a final nod to KPFK. I want you to pick up those phones once again. Here we are on our pledge drive, but guess what? It's working. It's working because you're showing up. And we are showing up for you. We are now live streaming video. You could see all of this gorgeous video if you go to YouTube, Kerry Harrison. You could just Google YouTube, Kerry Harrison together. You can go to Twitter, X, same thing. Google Twitter, X, or just Twitter, Kerry Harrison, C-A-R-Y, Twitch, it doesn't matter. You name it, the whole soup, cat, and pizzas. And we're out there showing up for you and making sure that these programs get to other states of the 50 states, because we are at the head of the spear in many places, and we are the only spear left. So pick up the phone right now. Call 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Make a $50 donation, a $75 donation, a $100 donation. You're going to get so much bang for your buck. It is unbelievable. Now that you know you can reach people on TikTok, you can reach them on Instagram, you can reach them on Facebook, you can reach them on YouTube, you can reach them on anything with a chip and a signal, at least through this show, Rethinking Heroes. And trust me, the others will soon follow. I'm so thrilled to have been with you this week, and I hope you do have a wonderful week. And you can always get in touch with me through rethinkingheroes.com.
Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Kerry Harrison. rethinkingheroes.com.